So thank you, colleagues. I think we have all the speakers. So let's start the special case, the panel 5, on the special case of the food and agriculture sector. And my thanks wholeheartedly to Roshan and NGIC and the COP29 to really have a section that is dedicated to agriculture and food. So we have 5 eminent speakers with us today. We have Dr. Ismail Serageldin, that everybody knows. The co-chair of NGIC, but also vice president of the World Bank previously. We have Dr. Ilhama Gadimova, and she's with us here. She's a member of the organizing committee of COP29, but also a deputy minister of agriculture of the Republic of Azerbaijan. We have with us Dr. Meera Shah, the program manager for enhancing agriculture adaptation at the Ban Ki-moon Center for Global Citizens. We have with us His Excellency Filip Vujanovic, President of Montenegro, previous President of Montenegro. And we have with us Dr. Abdulaziz Altwaijri, the former Director General of ISESCO. So, colleague, I'm really honored today to really bring you this panel together. We're going to address the challenges of how to transform the agriculture and food sectors from being a major emitter of greenhouse gas to be it part and a main player in a solution to climate change. I will go with 2 rounds of questions. So what I'm going to ask my speakers is to make their intervention within 3 minutes. So we have two rounds of questions, and then we can open it for the speakers or the participant on the floor. So maybe as an intro, I think we have talked about agriculture yesterday a little bit. We do all recognize that 33% or so of emission comes from the ag sector. But really also what we recognize is that the sector requires a transition towards sustainability and resilience, and the sector can definitely increase its sequestration capacity. But how we do so, and how could we move towards a just transition for agri-food system? I think the turning point was definitely 2021 with the United Nations Food System Summit that was called by the Secretary General Guterres. And that UN Food System Summit in 2021 really brought the discussion at the system level. Before, we were really talking mostly at the production level without looking at the whole value chain or the whole system. It is very important to know that the whole population eats, so we all need food, so we can't say this is a sector that we can minimize, definitely not. But also you will be surprised to know about 3.5 billion people work in this sector when you look at the whole system from A to Z. So it is a sector that is raison d'être for us and source of life for us, but also source of livelihoods for 3.5 billion people. So how could we really move with the revolution in science, particularly in biology, that Ismail reminded us just a few minutes ago, but also in ICT and other areas, to really have a transition towards sustainability and resilience, but not any transition, but a just transition that look at the small-scale producers. We have about 500 million small-scale producers that are mostly in the global south, and that produce about 70% of our food, and those people needs to have a just transition. And when we talk about agriculture, we talk about the broader agriculture, so it's crop, animal, food production, but also forestry, fisheries, and natural resource management that is connected with the agriculture. With that, I'm gonna start with you, Dr. Ismail Serageldin. From your extensive experience both in the World Bank, but also in a number of panels, a number of commissions, a number of institutions and think tanks, how do you see us really moving forward, and how could we make sure that we have a just transition for this gigantic sector, which is the agriculture and food sector?
Thank you, Ismail. I believe that we need a very special focus on the sector of food and agriculture, because while we can increase the efficiency of the operations in other sectors and maybe reduce their contributions to global emissions, food and agriculture is the only sector that can be flipped from being part of the problem to being part of the solution. It is the best chance we have for significant carbon capture and sequestration, because after all, this was nature's very own carbon capture system. The plants capture CO2 and emit oxygen. So we are all here at their request. It can be done. I think Ismail mentioned that lives and livelihoods depend on that, and specifically in very different agroecologies. So you have jungle areas that are being deforested, but you also have the dry areas that are running out of water and so on, but each of these can be solved independently. Fundamentally, I have 6 points to make about that. First and foremost, despite all that we're going on right now, we have about 10% of the world population is still going hungry. So it's not an efficient sector. It has huge waste. About 30% of it is wasted. According to the World Economic Forum, it's about $1.3 trillion a year that is wasted in the food and agriculture sector. I'm talking from preparation all the way to consumer. So what do we do? Well, first of all, landscapes. We are affected. Deforestation, soil erosion, desertification is impacting very negatively on that. We are destroying forests at the rate of about 1 Portugal a year, this area of Portugal. So we try to reforest, but we're not catching up on that. Secondly, water use efficiency. Globally, the sector consumes 70% of all water withdrawals, over 2/3. And in many of the developing countries, the poorest countries, it's about 80% of the water withdrawals are going to agriculture. Just to remind everybody, you may drink maybe a couple of liters, but you consume 2,700 liters a day through the calories that you eat in your meal, because it takes 1,200 tons of water to produce a ton of wheat and 3,000 to 5,000 tons of water to produce 1 ton of rice. So that's a major measure. Water use efficiency is very important. We must resolve the question of waste. I'm on the poor side, on the poor countries, the smallholder farmers that Ismail mentioned. They have no storage capacity, very poor infrastructure, poor roads, etc. And therefore, as much as 30 to 35% of the harvest is lost in post-harvest losses. But the rich consumers throw away 30% of the food that's already processed and available for the rich consumers. So everywhere, much better can be done. And how do we do that? Well, we have the scientific revolution that we can deal with right now. I mentioned in the last session, but it's worthwhile just reminding you. 60 years ago, with a technology that barely existed, with hardly any communication, in a country as vast as India, which was on the verge of famine. Many people were predicting famines in India at the time. We were able, through the so-called Green Revolution and the CGIAR, which Ismahane now is the key officer of, to take food grains from 51 million tons to 276. That's a multiplication of 5 times. Horticulture went up to 305 million tons, which makes it number 2 in the world. This is India. The milk went from 17 million tons to 155 million, 9 times the maximum, and number 1 in the world producer. And fish went from less than 1 million tons to 11.4, 15-fold increase, and number 2 in the world. If they could do that with the science and technology and communications that they had in those days, there is no excuse that we cannot transform the food and agricultural sector so from being part of the problem to being part of the solution. How do we do that? Well, we have remote sensing now, and we can have people can get information on their mobiles, and very poor people know how to use mobiles. We see that in M-Pesa in Nairobi, where its banking system is all functional on mobiles among the poorest people. there. And we can bring them, therefore, integrated soil, water, and nutrient management. And the new biology will give us the right kind of plants that are soil tolerant, water, heat tolerant, that have deep roots, that have short growing seasons, high yield, good quality nutrition content as well. There's also the new biology is being used to reduce the methane emissions from cattle production by changing the biome inside the guts of the cattle themselves and by changing the food they take. By changing the photosynthesis pathways, technically we call it the C3, C4 transition, you can have the same trees that you are planting that are growing up would consume twice as much carbon as they're growing up as opposed to letting them as they were before. We can have nitrogen fixation on the ground for, which is now with legumes, but we could bring it perhaps with new pathways to crops and therefore reduce the need for nitrogen artificial fertilizer and therefore reduce also the energy content of that. We can do a lot of all of this, but most important, I think, is that we have to remember lives and livelihoods, and this can be done with the collaboration between the international system of agricultural research. Luckily, we have a system that connects all of these international agricultural research centers and the national systems, because we need to do whatever we're going to do has to also be adapted locally to the local agroecology, but it can be done. It was done, as I mentioned in the statistics I just gave you, it was done once before with much more rudimentary and primitive, no, right word, primitive. They didn't even, when this started, 1951, first thinking about that, people didn't know about DNA. I mean, the publication, the Crick-Watson paper was 1953. And so you had hardly any of these things, and look what they achieved. So we have no excuse not to do it. It's important for the world, it's important for lives and livelihoods, and it's essential for climate change. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ismail, and thank you for the call of hope that if it was done in 1960s in India, we could do it globally now with the technologies and the innovation we have. So with that, I'm gonna move to Mrs. Ilhama Gadimova. Thank you for joining us. So Ilhama, as a member of the organizing committee of COP29, could you help us understand better the agriculture sector in Azerbaijan and how you are, how much you are committed and how you're gonna do an agri-food transformation towards climate action?
Dear participants, welcome everybody to our city. First of all, I'm honored to join this high-level meeting on our journey to COP29, focusing on the critical topic of the special case on the food and agriculture sector. To say about Azerbaijan agri-food system, there are some things, simple things coming from the old COPs. For example, this is the land issue and water issue, because it's important every time for every country. And this is subjects every time was so important from old COP times too. And Azerbaijan, first of all, I would like to say that Azerbaijan's agriculture sector faces significant risks from climate change, including temperature fluctuations, altered precipitation patterns, and increased extreme weather events. That's why this challenge threatens our agriculture productivity, food security, and livelihood of rural communities. In response of the right now government of Azerbaijan on the presidential decree has declared this year as the Green World Solidarity Year, emphasizing our dedication to combining climate change adverse effects. Especially on the agriculture sector, we know that food security every time is important, and it will be important in future too, because we can't stop ourselves to eat something. And in Azerbaijan, it's important too, because agriculture gets big role on the food safety. But from old times till today, we need to change. We need to stop fighting with the nature and to go with that. Because for sustainability, we need to have the sustainable agriculture in our country too. That's why what we started to do. Of course, in this sector, all times, government subsidized the farmers for production, and we continue to teach with farmers with this mechanism. What we are doing. For example, every farmer needs to learn their land at the beginning, that to use fertilizer correctly. And to have the sustainable production for future. That is why we are asking result of the analysis from the farmers on the subsidy process. Otherwise, for water issue, I would like to say something, especially on technology, because if we have a problem in our land, for example, with approximately 1.5 million hectares of irrigated land, we need modern irrigation system here. Modern irrigation system is essential here. And our government has provided substantial financial support with subsidies totaling 93 million manats. It's approximately $55 million for irrigation system installation of the 38,000 hectares of land over the past 5 years. But it's not enough. We need to continue, and we need to cover all irrigated areas by the modern irrigation system that to save the water at the same time. In other issue, last one, I would like to attention to the technology, because here it's important to have the integrated innovative techniques and technological advancements into our agricultural practices. I am particularly pleased to announce that Agrocredit and Development Agency under the Ministry of Agriculture, following the presidential decree approved on November last year, will enhance state support for agriculture and leasing activities. The government will subsidize partial interest rates and provide state guarantees for loans allocated to commercial entities by banks using their own financial resource. This is regulation aimed to boost food wheat production through the execution of modern irrigation system and mitigate the negative impacts of the climate change. Furthermore, the decree has expanded the list of agricultural machinery eligible for state subsidies to include advanced technology, equipment such as drones, robotics, intelligent control system, agricultural meteorological devices for climate and irrigation control, and innovative laboratory equipment for seed selection. These technologies are transforming our agriculture sector, making it more efficient, sustainable, and resilient. This is just some examples from our strategy, and it continues according to COP29 points too. I think we will share more information on COP29.
Thank you very much,
Thank
Ilhama.
you.
And maybe in the second question, you can give us more detail on COP29. But thank you for highlighting the different measures that you are taking to modernize agricultural sector in Azerbaijan. I'm going to move to Meera. And Meera, based on your understanding of agriculture and food system in Africa, what do farmers need to leverage transformation in the food and agriculture sector from a major greenhouse gas emitter to a significant contributor? What specific intervention have the potential to enhance efficiency and sustainability at scale at the farmer's level?
Thank you. And thank you for the question. I also would like to just quickly thank the Nijami Ganzawi Center, did I say that correct, for having me here. I've been put on a very distinguished panel, so I'm a little bit nervous. Please bear with me if I am jumping over my words. I also will take the opportunity to very quickly bring you greetings from SG Ban Ki-moon and from Dr. Heinz Fischer, the former president of Austria. So you've asked me a two-part question. The first is, how do we convert the sector from being a problem, in a sense, to being a solution, and perhaps some examples of how we do that. Let me just very quickly bring the case of climate justice into this. Africa is a continent of 54 countries and 1.2 billion people, but its contribution to greenhouse gas emissions to date is under 4%. The agriculture sector in Africa contributes, the emissions are growing, but still around about 20% of the continental emissions. So when we're asking smallholder farmers to mitigate emissions, it is seriously unfair. This problem is not a farmer problem, and it's certainly not one that was created in Africa. Having said that, and this is the fun part that I enjoy about working in this space, is actually there is a lot of scope for doing two things at the same time. As Dr. Serageldin said, the agriculture sector in Africa can really be a solution while dealing with the problem itself. So for Africa's farmers, adaptation is very urgent. And when you speak to them, normally, we spoke in the earlier panel about the interface between science and policy. The recommendations are somewhere around improve soil health, improve water management, and use resilient crops. In other words, change what you grow or change how you grow it. I think that broadly accommodates what is required on adaptation. I will quickly go through 3 solutions that have proven to work, and I hope that they will describe that this sector is so dynamic. When you're intervening in the name of adaptation, in the name of mitigation or something else, the impacts are really far-fetched and very often very positive. Very quickly then, so the first example is something called a push-pull technology. So East Africa grows a lot of cereals, but when you put cereals in large monocultures, they get invaded by stem borers or they get invaded by weeds. What you then do to stop that reducing your overall output is you either put Desmodium, which is a leguminous plant, and you put a Napier, which is a grass, next to it. What happens here? Desmodium will push the pests, they don't like it, and Napier grass will attract them. What happens in the meantime? Everything else that you grew around it, your maize, brilliant, it's very happy. It's not got any more problems with that. But, and this is where it's very interesting, Napier grass is nitrogen fixing, as he mentioned earlier. So you were trying to solve a pest problem, but you've also got a climate change solution in that. Wonderful. And this solution has also shown that farmers can increase their overall yield by 3 times by trying to solve something else. So very, very exciting sector to me, at least. My second example is sustainable rice production. This is really something that actually started in India, but is now expanding very rapidly across the world and is being tested in many African countries, including Nigeria. Rice, when you imagine it being grown, is in paddy fields, normally submerged in a lot of water. That is a huge source of methane. That one seriously problematic greenhouse gas that we have to deal with in agriculture. Sustainable rice production means you reduce how long and how much water your rice sits in. Immediately, what happens is the conditions for creating methane are taken away. You improve your soil, you're not having to put a lot of fertilizer, and your output goes up. Again, this has shown to double rice production. So you're solving so many problems when you're trying to only really solve one. Wonderful. Final example, agroforestry in Malawi. One of the biggest causes of emissions in agriculture sector, especially in Africa, comes from deforestation. It's taking out existing forests so you can convert them into farmland and produce some food. Agroforestry essentially reverses that. You're putting trees back onto your farm, and with that, not only do you get an additional source of income, it takes the heat away when we know temperatures are rising, and you get all sorts of other benefits from its leaves and from its fruit, from the nuts that it produces, etc. Putting trees back, we all know, that is that one age-old solution to removing greenhouse gases. So, I've given you 3 examples of things that work. We have the solutions. They all exist. These are, seriously, I mean, Ismahane, I think you will tell me these were so basic and so old. I hear you. It is very true. There is so much going on. There is a lot of opportunity here. The solutions exist, but there are 3 problems from where I see it. The first, farmers don't always know about them. The second, farmers cannot always afford them. And the third, the solutions that we have created, and all the ones I've spoken about, they were created for a world that wasn't warming. They were created for a world that didn't see this rapid change in climate change, in the climate. So let me then just quickly provide, yes, wrapping up now, just quickly provide the last comments on this. So we have a situation where farmers don't know about them. Well, then we tell them about them. We share the knowledge, we build the capacity, we inform, we educate, we train. Extension systems, that is what Africa needs a lot of investment in. Keynote, investment word there. Second, I said it's a very risky, very unaffordable, very expensive endeavor when you have 2 hectares of land and not really a lot of savings to fall back on to try new things. So we need to de-risk all of these new solutions for the farmers. And the third and final, we have to innovate. Ismahane. Aditi, who is not here today but was yesterday from CGIAR, she pointed out, as I have said, that all of the solutions we've been talking about were created in completely different environmental and climatic conditions. We need to invest in adaptation, but adaptation, research, and innovation for a new world. It is absolutely urgent. So, just very quickly then, literally this is my last comment. We need finance for adaptation. I said this yesterday, I say this today. Something like 18 times the value of current adaptation financing needs to come into the space that we're speaking about. I will stop at that.
Thank you very much, Meera, and thank you for giving a quite comprehensive situation in Africa. With that, we heard Azerbaijan, we heard Africa. We're going to move to you, President Filip, to give us a bit more the regional perspective. How do you see cooperation at the regional perspective helping us to get food security, water security, and climate change adaptation at the regional? How did you do it in your time, or how do you think we should do it?
I think that our topic is very, very significant because, as our co-chair mentioned, we have a great problem of food and water. We are obliged to, following Paris Agreement, to do everything to solve it. Concerning situation with food, we know that about 40% of the annual global food production is wasted. And agricultural sector is so significant concerning it. It is necessary to solve the problem of excessive food production in rich countries and the lack of it in poor countries, and it should be solved as soon as possible. The problem of food is a problem of its volume, structure, quality, and distribution. Because of lack of food, life and health of people in poor countries and regions are threatened. In rich countries, food is massively destroyed if it is not fresh, not diverse, not healthy. It is very hard to understand, and it is very hard to have information and to have such position in international community. That is why the distribution of food in global level is necessary for justice and humanity. We must have situation in international community which will respect issue of food and agricultural sector in the international community. We must do everything to have activities of the governments, business, to be together, to do everything to solve such situation concerning food and concerning water. It is necessary. It is precondition for good quality of life for citizens, and I think that the United Nations is obliged to do everything to encourage it and to be in situation to realize Paris Agreement, which is accepted in the United Nations for the countries which are obliged to realize their obligation concerning United Nations members. I think it is necessary that we use experience of all countries who are in situation to have a very good position concerning food. Maybe Azerbaijan is a good example. Azerbaijan is in position to have a food and experience for managing it, which could be, I think, a very interesting task of COP29. And I am concerning it very satisfied that Azerbaijan will be in situation to transfer their experience concerning it, and believing in good results of COP29, I'm so happy because Azerbaijan will be in situation to contribute it concerning food and managing of food. I think that it was a very good decision that COP29 will be here, and I think that it is a very good recognition of the Azerbaijan policy concerning it. Being in situation to use everything to transfer Azerbaijan's experience to other countries. And I think that that part of COP29 could be dedicated to that issue. And concerning it, concerning knowing how Azerbaijan is preparing this COP, I'm sure and I wish that this COP, and I'm sure that it will be successful, and I expect the result of it, knowing that this part of COP29 is very important.
Thank you very much, Filip, and definitely maybe we will hear more about how COP gonna address it, but it's a very good point that really this is a COP in a region that is quite specific, and there is a regional component that is very important to be reflected. And your point on food waste and loss, like Ismail point, it's very important one, and they take us, it's a good segue to Dr. Abdulaziz Altwaijri to tell us more about how should we tackle it from the educational side. So we heard about the need for knowledge in farmers in Africa. We heard about behavioral change and the need for people to learn how to deal better with food and water, particularly. So how do you see us really using both communication and educational curricula to really design a better world where the people really take care of their natural resources and reduce waste and loss at large, particularly waste.
Thank you very much, Madam, and I have to greet all our friends here and say good morning to all of you. I am very pleased and honored to be part of this meeting and of NGIC in general. Whenever we come to Baku, we have this thrilling feeling that we are at home, surrounded by generosity and warm welcome. The issue of the environment in its generality is a very complicated one, as all of you have expressed. And I think education plays a great role in educating people, guiding them to a better behavior that preserve the environment with all its components and all its problems, and give them the master plan, if I may say so, to behave in a civilized way, not to level damage to the environment, and benefit from it and protect it and preserve all its components. It has been established now that the agriculture, the global food system in its entirety is responsible for about a third of the greenhouse gas emissions, only second to the energy sector. And this is a big problem. Food is meant to sustain humans and keep them alive. But humans are now not using the right methods and the right behavior to make this bounty that God has given them in the right way. So education comes here to tell people how to behave, how to straighten their minds and behavior in their societies, to protect their environment, not to level damage on water, on soil, on environment, on air, which we are doing now, especially in areas where people are not well educated, and also in the industrialized world. Greed has played a great role in making them look for financial benefits and economic growth on the expenses of the safety of the planet and the well-being of its inhabitants. In ISESCO, when I was a Director General a few years ago, I stopped being in this post for now 5 years, but in 2002, I suggested to the member states to create a conference for the ministers of environment to tackle this issue. And this was the first conference in the Islamic joint work that addressed this important issue, environment in all its aspects, climate change, renewable energy, and dealing with the corruption that many people are doing to pollute the environment and make life very difficult and safe. And this conference started in 2002 in Jeddah in Saudi Arabia and continued to be convened every 2 years, where the ministers come and put their plans and their views regarding the issues of the environment in all its aspects in front of each other. And before that, there were experts who are preparing for the conference and putting, some suggestions, some thoughts and ideas on how these ministers can benefit from each other, and each country can benefit from the other countries. And luckily, I succeeded in convincing the Saudi government to finance this conference because nobody wanted to host it. It's very expensive. And graciously, the government of Saudi Arabia donated a very huge sum of money every 2 years to cover the expenses of the conference, and it is still going on. I'm very happy that this is one of the achievements that ISESCO has done in its 35, 38 years of its age. This is number one. Number two, we introduced curricula plans and ideas for the member states to include in their educational system to educate the young generation on how to preserve the environment, how to behave nicely and civilizedly in dealing with it for their own safety and for the safety of the whole population of the earth. And I think education is a core issue in this whole problem, because it's not only the role of the scientists and the researchers and the governments, but also education, because without good education, we will continue to waste things and corrupt our communities and our environment and level great damage on it. And we moved from the verse that is in the Quran that says, "And do not do mischief on earth after it has been set in order." God prohibits causing mischief on the earth. And the mischief is polluting the water, polluting the air, causing the emissions to increase, and all that problem that we are facing. And the late reports from the World Bank shows that it was those people who are suffering from acute food insecurity increased from 135 million in 2019 to 345 million in 82 countries in 2022. And I think it is more than that now in 2024. So this is a big problem that we have all to collaborate. And I'm very optimistic because COP29 will be organized here in this country, which has many capabilities and goodwill. And I think it will add to the previous editions of COP to find solutions for these malignant problems that we are saving. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much,
that we are facing.
Abdulaziz,
Thank you.
And thank you for giving us tangible example of how ISESCO brought countries together around the education and environment. So maybe I'll go for my second round, and I'll go to you, Ismail. You talked about really great technologies that we can use. You talked about the need for them to be locally adapted. I want to pick your brain, particularly from your seat as ex-president of the World Bank. How could we finance that? What will be the model to make sure that the transition is right, given that we heard about climate justice, we heard about a human right to have access to food as well. We heard about the distribution that is completely messed up and so on and so forth. So how do you see finance coming to the ag sector to move it towards a sequester, particularly those local population and small-scale producers?
Actually, financing in agriculture is not a problem, because it ends up being small scale and local. And the current president of Singapore said something very nice. He says, people say we need large scale transformations, but you can have large scale by having lots of small scale. Then it becomes large scale. So that's very much what it is. And you need institutions like cooperatives, like agricultural extension services and so on to reach the smallholder farmers. And now with communication, we can do that. And I believe I was with you in Washington when we were looking at farmer chat, and AI-based system in the local languages being tested in Ethiopia and in India at a small scale to help the farmers. So I think that is not going to be the real issue. I believe we have a much bigger issue, which is the fact that a younger generation that is educated does not want to become farmers. And if you look at the average age of farmers in many of African places, for example, and so on, they are touching 60. And this is a big issue, because there is no substitute structures, there are no huge mechanization systems and so on that would take over from these, especially in the distributed populations we have in the poor areas. Even more specifically in the dry areas, which incidentally cover 40% of the land area of the world and have 40% of the world population, but include 80% of the poorest people in the dry areas. We have real problems because they rely on rainfall, and rainfall is becoming more erratic. And you have almost touch-and-go famine situations. And the World Food Program can tell you about how they're trying to keep the lid on a number of cases where famine could happen. So I think the real issue we're going to have is in ensuring that transition is how to reach these farmers, this generation of farmers, and do the transformations that are going to be good enough to attract at least part of the children to stay on farm and produce. And that's a tough problem, which is tied with education and health and other things as well. On finance, I think we will hear more in the coming session, but I think it is feasible to find the money that we need when we need it. But we must avoid bureaucratization. We must have the kind of commitment that you had between the international best research in the level of international agricultural research centers in collaboration with the national and local systems. And when that happens, then the transitions will be very fast, because the new technologies that we are witnessing right now are beyond belief. I mentioned to some of you at the Harvard lab of George Church, they have done 160,000 edits in the genome of one bacterium. I mean, can you imagine? Not just one edit, 160,000 edits in one genome of a bacterium to make it virus-proof. But that's another story. But the point I'm making is that the technology is there. We have the tools for it, but we need to address it rather than trying to make obesity drugs and new makeup for ladies and so on with all these new technologies. We need to focus it on getting the right kinds of plants for the poor farmers in the world. And I think we have the means to do that. It's just the priority and the will. And finally, to give you a depressing statement, one of my favorite presidents in the United States was Jack Kennedy, who has a very eminent statement. In 1963, before he died, he was at the Hunger Summit, World Hunger Summit, and he said, "We have the means to abolish hunger in our lifetime. The only thing we lack is the will to do it." Guess what? 60 years later, we're still looking for the political will. And let's face it, the farmers in the industrial countries, the farmers have a lot of political clout. And in the countries that are not industrialized, that are dependent on agriculture, the farmers have hardly any say at all politically. So that's part of the problems we'll have to face. Thank you.
Thank you, and you sum it very nicely, Ismail. It is about political will, because the solutions are there and could be scaled up. But unfortunately, we haven't done it for a century now. So with that, I will come back to you to say your final statement at the end. Ilhama, over to you then. So how Azerbaijan is bringing transformation of agri-food system on the agenda in COP29, and what's your plan to convince countries to come forward and to continue really what happened between Glasgow, Sharm el-Sheikh, and Dubai?
Thank you for questions. First of all, I would like to say that I agree, Mr. Filip, that Azerbaijan is correct country for COP29. Why? Because this country, energy country and agriculture country. And that's why this country now challenges, risks from both sectors. It's important. And why I have noted this point, I would like to say that at the same time, the small countries, it's a correct place where you can do new practices, pilot projects, because you can get success in the small place and to put as an example to the world. What we are going to do on the COP29 on agriculture sector, I just would like to say some small points here. You know, from the previous COPs, every time coming subjects about the water, about the land, subject is continue, because it's okay, we need to use soil effectively we need to use the lands. That's why it's important using of the pesticide, using of the fertilizer, and we need for sustainability to know our land and to use all these points. And save water, it's second issue coming from the previous COPs. It continue again. And according to this point, on the first time I talked about the modern technology, I think modern technology is going to save the water. At the same time, it increases the productivity at the same time. That's why win-win. It's on the both sides you can win. But we forget one small point. Who is doing all this? Who use this land? Who use this water? This is the human, of course. This is the farmers, as we say. That's why we are going to focus on the farmer. Of course, everybody in every country where they live, the farmers, everybody say that we can catch all farmers. In our country, same too. Our farmers learns from the neighbor, not from us, from the minister or from the TV or something else. They are talking with neighbors and learning, doing something what they are doing. But it's not true every time. In several years, we tried to teach farmers. But if you can't catch everybody, all farmers, if you can't catch, how you can learn, how you can teach everybody? It's impossible. That's why. But it's important adaptation on the climate change. We need empower farmers. That's why this is the harmony between all these subjects. It's important land, it's important water, it's important farmer. We don't need to forget about the farmer. Maybe we can start from the evaluate of the farmers that to get something, to catch correct farmer. Maybe we need to empower farmers, farmer communities, and something else. This is a new subject will come on the COP29 on agriculture sector. And I would like here to put important question that because we have some mistakes here. For example, can we evaluate modern green farmer who practice climate resilient agriculture the same way we evaluate traditional farmers? Traditional metric focus primarily on economic output and how much farmer produces and earns. But is this enough in the context of the climate change and sustainability? Evaluating farmers solely on the yield and profit ignores the broader impacts of their practices on the environment and society. It's like judging an electric car based solely on its fuel tank capacity. Using these traditional tools to evaluate modern farms is not just inadequate, it's counterproductive. That's why we need to leave traditional tools. We need to monitor and evaluate performance progressive mechanisms that to catch progressive farmers, progressive human on agriculture even. How we can do it? We can talk on we can negotiate on the tools. First one is technology. We talked about the mobile phones. We are talking about something else. E-agro systems in Azerbaijan, we have the e-agro system too. And all farmers, to get the subsidy, for example, they put some data to this system. This is the big data because you know everything about the farmers. And you can catch them. It's important. And this is the new tools that to catch the correct farmer for future. And second small issue we would like to put here, I would like especially to notice it. We also recognize the future of agriculture lies on the hands of the women and youth. That's why programs like the Women Empowerment Project by FAO Azerbaijan and in other countries too. It's so important training women in these countries and to catch resource that on agriculture issue. And by doing so, we are not only fostering innovation, but also ensuring the sustainability and resilience of the agriculture sector too.
Thank you very much, Ilhama, and thank you for bringing also the farmer-centric, the people-centric, the woman-centric approach. And we hope really that in COP29, the food and agriculture are going to be in the Leaders' Day as well. That's a very important gain that we got in COP28, and I think we should not lose it. Now moving back to you, Meera. So Meera, you mentioned really different examples from really what works well in Africa and what we need. And really for me, the point on extension, that we invest more in extension, the fact that we need to de-risk agriculture as a whole, and the fact that we need to prepare agriculture for tomorrow, for the future, are very, very important. What about engagement of youth? Ismail really mentioned it as a bigger problem than finance in his perspective. It's really the manpower and how we bring the youth in it. So what's your perspective on that in the African, given that most of the African countries have an average age of below 20, many. I saw some that are 17 and 18. So how do you see it in Africa?
Thank you. I have to say that is not a question I was prepared for, but I will give it a go. So at the Ban Ki-moon Center, one of the things that we do is connect youth and leaders into this subject area. How do we bring more youth into food systems? How do we keep them on the farms, as Dr. Serageldin asked? Firstly, this is not a uniquely African problem in any sense of the world. Europe is going through the same thing. There is a serious aging problem in Europe's farmers. Nobody wants to go into farming. Why? It's hard work. It's really hard work. No, there is no living out of it. It is so expensive to do farming, and what you earn just doesn't match up. So, how do you get more farmers onto the field? How do you keep them there? Make it less hard. Make sure they keep the money. There is a third part of it, and I will come to that in a minute. So, make it less hard, mechanization. We really, really, really need to improve access to machinery in Africa. The last time I looked into this in research form, there was some statistic that said something like 10% of smallholder farmers in Africa use any form of complex machinery. 10%. 90% of smallholder farmers are going out in that blazing sun, digging holes and doing this stuff in hardcore labor. We need to provide them access to machinery and really improve the type of machinery that works on their farms, small farms. The other one, keeping the income. This is where it gets exciting, I think. Smallholder farmers, especially young ones in Africa, are doing so much innovation. A lot of these digital solutions that we've been speaking about that come up, there is so much going on. It's all coming out of smallholder farmers. They want to improve this. They want to do more farming, but they want to do it better. That is where the opportunities are. Make it lucrative for them to invest in, to develop, to implement a lot of these solutions. There are a lot of solutions out there. There's a lot of problems with the financing for these solutions, but it is an opportunity to keep young people in farms. I'm going to stop there.
Thank you so much, Meera, and I agree. With technology, as Ismail said, we could attract youth, but we need also to have the true cost of food. Right now, most of us are paying very little for food, whereas we are paying a lot for our cars, we are paying a lot for our houses. So there is also, and there is the ecosystem services that we mentioned. Could we pay farmers for ecosystem services, given that we want to move them towards more ecosystem services? And they are not paid for it right now. So moving to you, Filip, Meera mentioned mechanization. We talked a lot, and Ismail particularly talked a lot, biological innovations. So how do you see us really bringing those biological innovation to really address the issue and to have a just transition in agri-food system, particularly with the debate around some of those biological innovation in Europe, for example?
I think it is so important, and it is necessary to affirm it and to dedicate from all subjects to improve everything, to provide better position concerning it. In my country, we are aware that it is very significant, and I have to say that Montenegro, as a small country, the smallest country in the Western Balkan, is a good example concerning implementation of Paris Agreement. And in that area, we are dedicated to do everything what is necessary to improve. Following awareness of our citizens and willingness and readiness of state to do everything to give impetus, to encourage our activities, and to show that Montenegro is a good example. I think concerning implementation of Paris Agreement, Montenegro is a good example. And I think that it is so important, especially for our region, Western Balkan, and I'm sure that our state policy will be in position to continue it. It is so important to show that you are ready to respect sign of Paris Agreement, accepted it in United Nations, and to be a good example for other countries, especially in the region, especially in the so sensitive region, and the Western Balkan is, that you are ready to be a good example. Concerning your question, I think that Montenegro is a good example.
Thank you very much, Filip. The last question to Abdulaziz, going back to education and attracting youth to agriculture, how do you see us really using education to bring back youth to the sector that they are deserting, as Meera said, in Africa and globally?
As I said previously, that education plays a great role in this field, but we have to admit that the problem is so complicated and wide and uncontrollable to a certain extent. But with collaboration, meaningful collaboration between the governments and the private sector and the NGOs and the researchers and the communities, we can find a way, a pathway to a better situation in the world. The role of education is effective when it is adopted by the governments, widespread in different levels of education, in elementary schools, intermediate schools, secondary schools, universities, and also supported by the cultural activities that are carried out by each country, and also by the media, which plays a great role in disseminating the right information, the right guidance, and the right advices to the communities to how to maintain good production and at the same time preserving the environment. It's very important to know that ensuring the well-being of farmers and their communities is fundamental during the transition towards a more sustainable agricultural industry. Engaging farmers and communities, traditional agriculture practices with the processes is also crucial. We cannot come to a rural area in a third world country and try to apply what is applied in Europe or in some other advanced countries. We have to be realistic in dealing with each situation, because each community and each location has its own problems that differ from the other parts of the world. So a holistic plan that cares for all these differences and needs can be very crucial and important in maintaining a better care for the environment, and education is in the core of that. And I hope UNESCO comes forward, because UNESCO has been very active in the past decades. I witnessed this when I was a Director General, at the time of Federico Mayor, at the time of Koichiro Matsuura, at the time of Irina Bokova. Now UNESCO is part of the Foreign Ministry of France. I'm very sorry to say that. It's not as it used to be, as an independent international organization that cares for the well-being and the culture and the education and the science and the communication of the whole world. It's now part of the Foreign Ministry of France. I'm sorry to say that, but I'm sure about that. So UNESCO should come forward to play its duty and crucial role in disseminating the real culture and the real education that helps the communities, protect the environment and make it also good for themselves and good for the world. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you, Abdulaziz, and I see you got passionate about it. Thank you so much for bringing the local adaptation component and all the rest. So I have 6 people, and 3 young people in them, 3 young people and 3 young at heart people that are gonna come in. And then I'm gonna get to my speakers to give us one last message and maybe to reply to the questions. So I'm gonna start. I have Manas, then Noel, then Hakima, then Maimouna, then Boris, and then last to Kilab. So Manas, over to you. And I would ask you really to be brief, because we have 6 of you gonna speak in and the 5 panelists to reply. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you so much. My name is Manas Chawla. I am one of the NGIC young leaders from the United Kingdom. Often when I meet sort of world leaders, there's sometimes an idea that young people are too critical, that all we do is criticize, and that the world is much tougher than that. So today I only want to focus on solutions. And I have 3 or 4 things I want to run through quickly. Yesterday there was a panel where I asked a question where Mr. Plavniliev said, we need to look at solutions that have already worked in particular countries and then globalize them. And so I went back and I did my research and I said, well, what's worked in the agriculture and food sector? I think the biggest example that no one's capitalized on is solutions in the plant-based food sector. Denmark is the first country in the world to have an actionable plant-based food plan. They've started creating subsidies for plant-based food providers. They started subsidizing plant-based food in all their public universities and their public schools. So if you're a school in Denmark and you give plant-based food, the government pays for half of it. And that's already started leading to radical changes in the way that people think about this food. It's started changing culture, but it's also started boosting this industry that critically needs funding to get off the ground. The second thing, I've done my PhD in AI, and we talk about ICT solutions to the agri-food sector. The cold hard truth is the best, most innovative solutions come from startups, but these startups in these sectors aren't sexy ones that get funding from Silicon Valley. You can't go to Sequoia and pitch an agri-food startup and expect to get $10 billion without ever having any profitable revenue the way Uber does. And so what we need is to build a technology ecosystem that governments can intervene in, right? We need to create accelerator funds. We need to earmark venture capital funding specifically for these startups. And we need to make sure that these startups are also the ones that are actively implementing their solutions in Global South countries, right? We talk about Global South countries. Meera outlined how Africa contributes to 4% only of global emissions. Well, here's another fact. The losses on African farms are literally twice the level in other parts of the world. So if I say that again, in exactly the places where people suffer most from poverty, where people suffer most from hunger and malnutrition, the losses in food waste in agriculture are twice what they are in other parts of the world, and they're contributing a negligible amount to global carbon emissions. So my third thing is to focus on those Global South countries, double, triple, quadruple the amount of funding we give to them, because it doesn't just solve the problem of climate change in the context of COP29, it also solves poverty, it also solves extreme hunger. It's not just strategic for our global economy, it's a moral obligation. And the last thing I'll say is we need to look for leveraged 10x solutions, right? We already have these, but we're not really investing in them as much as we should. You know, Gene, if I asked you when you were at ExxonMobil, if I could 10x your share price overnight, you'd say yes, right? If I asked Mr. Tajic if I could 10x Serbia's GDP, you know, you would instantly hire me as your chief advisor. Well, if I told you there's a way to 10x investment for smallholder farms, we need to invest in research in the sector. We've known for 4 to 5 years that for every dollar that we give to CGIAR, there's $10 that we get back for smallholder farms, for exactly the people that need it most. And we've known that this is not an overnight realization. We've had these cost-benefit analyses for years now. So those are the ones that we need to focus on first and foremost in getting massive amounts of funding. We can't just rely on the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and just rely on the philanthropy and the private sector. We need actual government action on these things to mobilize where we are to get to a sustainable and green sort of agri-food economy. I know there's lots of other speakers, so I'll rest it there. But thank you so much to NGIC for giving a space to sort of young leaders to talk about these crucial issues.
Thank you very much, Manas. And just to give you another number to add, Denmark has the largest pig population per head. So they have about 13 to 15 million pigs with a population of 6 million. That's why they're moving to plant-based. It's because of that big issue of a large pig population with lots of problems. So over to you, Noel, please.
Thank you so much. I'm Noel from India, and I just want to resonate Manas's point and also highlight the troubles we're facing in India. I think one of the issues we face in these kind of climate dialogues is that we adopt a one-size-fits-all policy. And speaking of mechanization, of course, mechanization is perfect. We need it. It builds an economy of scale. But I think the issue in India we have is we simply can't do it because we simply don't have the space. For reference, the average farm size in India is 0.8 hectares. That's not even enough for sustainable agriculture, for even sustenance agriculture. A farmer can't even feed himself with that, even if he didn't sell his crop. By implication, the average size of a farmer's landholding in the rural area is less than 0.8 hectares. It's about 0.4 hectares, which, in other words, you can't even fit a tractor into that piece of land. Imagine mechanizing that. Of course, we need solutions that go beyond mechanization. We need solutions that tap into the scientific studies that we have present with us and then commercialize it. And my question to the scientists in the room is this: how do you ensure that we have mechanizations in countries like India, in Africa, where the average landhold size is less than an hectare? And now consider this: as India's population keeps growing, this means that our farms get divided even further. From 0.8 hectare, in the next 10 to 20 years, we're going to see the average farm size being 0.4 hectares. The only alternative we have is to simply sell off farms and move to the cities. It de-incentivizes agriculture, even in a country that's already poor, where the simplest thing to do is to farm the land. Now, moving on, this is one aspect of it, right? If you want to have mechanization and introduce technology, how do we do it in the second aspect of agriculture, in supply chains? As Manas mentioned, again, most of our food simply goes waste at the production stage, at the harvest stage. We don't have cold supply chains because we simply don't have the financing. When you feed 1.4 billion people, you need a cold chain that matches 1.4 billion people, and we simply don't have it. And my question to you is, where are you going to get the financing from? We can sit here at dialogues like this, but if you don't talk about the financing methodology, there's no point of having any of the scientific achievements that we have so far. Money is what matters now, and it's really essential. And lastly, just to add to this, there's a negative incentive to agriculture in India. Money flows in from cash crops. We're selling flowers that are extremely water intensive, and we send these flowers all the way to Europe. We send it to the United States, and this is water being used in amongst the most water scarce countries in the world. I think India ranks third or fourth in the world in the amount of water scarcity, and yet we're producing flowers. We're producing soy, a virtual export of water. And I would like to commend China here, which has actually prevented, that has actually stopped and de-incentivized the growing of soybeans in China because it simply is water intensive. I honestly don't know why countries like ours are being incentivized to grow this. And we need to really tap into the source of financing. We need to tap into the market and correct these markets through regulators. And we do not have regulators for agriculture, and that is quite disappointing. Thank you. I'll stop here.
Thank you very much, Noel. I think both Manas and Noel gave us a bit of a reality check as well. And it's quite interesting that both of you are also asking the question on finance for startup, finance for farmers, and also maybe policy sometimes that is completely misconnected with the reality, the flour case, and maybe the subsidies behind those flour production systems. So with that, I'm gonna move, thank you so much, and I hope really that the panelists will pick up on those ideas. Over to you, Hakima.
Thank you so much. A very passionate debate concerning agriculture. Thank you for our speakers. I will come back to agriculture and climate change, and especially agriculture and COP29. We all agree on the impact of climate change on soil, water. Too much water, it's not good for agriculture. For example, UK has lost 8% of its production because of floods. In Africa, we are many dead because of floods, and or we are losing our production because of drought. Anyway, we agree on such things. Now, let's come back to the COP29. And within the party members of the COP, generally, you have two voices. One voice is the one of Meera. And Meera is considering that agriculture is not an emitter, and it's a part of the adaptation bloc and should receive money. Some party members are saying no. Agriculture is 10 to 12% of CO2 emissions. If we include deforestation, it's 25% of CO2 emissions. And if we include the loss of organic, the matter organic, loss of organic, it can reach 30%. What does it mean? It means that this is a sector which is an emitter. And when we talk to the agricultural people, we are talking to people who should mitigate their CO2 emissions. So let's make it clear that we need to build on a narrative to say, look, in the developing world, it's 60% to 80% of our task force. Our ancestral practices are the ones who are protecting environment because, you know, I'm not agronome, but I know that this is how it happened in our region. I think that we also need to give an alternative to the other voice, saying we are thinking how to transform agriculture to a sequestration carbon wells instead of emitters. And I know that the technologies, innovation exists to do so. So I think that it's very important that all together we have these two narratives. One, recognizing the fact, and that was a shame. Believe me, for 20 years, we could not point to the agriculture because it's a social sector. So nobody wanted to talk about it. Now, I'm happy that this debate is opened and we can find solution. Let me give you one last example. In Morocco, we were aware that we have a scarcity of water, but we were exporting water through our green plan because we were cultivating watermelon, strawberry, everything which is a very huge consumer of water. And then we decide, okay, we will switch to the Nexus energy. This is what I was talking about yesterday. Solar energy, and I was minister at that time of environment and launched 1 million solar energy panel for the farmers to avoid them to pump the water because you are using fossil fuel when you are doing agriculture. And imagine what, I increased the consumption of water because solar is free and the pump were working the whole day. So I think that we are at the time where we need to think about agriculture like industrial sector, social sector, but also environmental one. Thank you.
Hakima, over to you, Maimouna.
Thank you so much, Ismahane, and also the presenters. I look at the write-up on the panel 5. I think I would like to touch on the land use changes, the sustainable land management, urban green space, urban agriculture, and reducing waste. I think that is not touched so far. So because I would like to link to the political will, I think we need a data on the soil mapping and also the water resources mapping. Why? The political will to have the land use planning, and this land use planning is a gazetted spatial policy land use planning for which area will be gazetted as agriculture land, which area should be for the forestry, which area or which part of the city or which part of the country should be as a water catchment area, because there's always a competition. And from my experience as a former mayor, it's always a competition to convert fertile agricultural land into industrial land. Because the industry, in the era of industrialization, the industry, they can get a better economic growth, better income. So I think this is the political will to have the plan in each city, in each country, and they are really implementing that plan. That is one part that I would like to highlight in terms of city urbanization and food production agriculture. Second is on the technology. The technology, yes, there are cases where you don't need so much land. You can go into the vertical farming, factory farming. But how much? How many farmers, the small scale farmers can afford that technology, especially in the developing countries? They still need land, but still need, I think Meera has already mentioned it earlier, there must be accessible and affordable technology that we should share together with the developing countries. When we talk about the technology of usage of fertilizer, pesticide, and also the waste from the agriculture sector, the waste from the agriculture sector contribute to methane. Unregulated dumping of agriculture waste result in 2.6 billion tons of CO2. I think this is very important, and also equivalent by 2050 with methane as a main contributor. So when we look into technology, we look into fertilizer, and we also have to look into food production versus health. There are good like GMO, hormone injection. You know that the chicken can from the chick can be sold into the market within 2 months, 3 months. So I think this, how can we look into this health? And last but not least is that we really need to have a change mindset in terms of the urban spaces where we can convert into urban farming for the local consumption. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maimouna. But I hope the panelists can reply to some of your question and your comment. Boris, over to you.
I just wanted to mention something that I think we have to take into the consideration. Everything what we are talking about agriculture in the world nowadays, crystal clear evidence that we are living in an interconnected world, and everything is connected with some other fields. And also our panels, science and influence of science on politics, previous panel, and right now panel about agriculture, and next panel about healthcare. All those panels are interconnected. And as my experience from different fields, as a former president of my country, I have to mention a few things. Also, fighting organized crime is connected with agriculture, because production of drugs is totally depend on agriculture. In Central Asia, this is heroin and cocaine. In Latin America, without reforms of agriculture there is no possibility to fight organized crime. But I was always having dilemma why the world is not, the rich countries are not investing in the reforms of agriculture in Colombia, I mean, or Afghanistan, and because some of those countries are financing the activities from such a horrible organized crime activities. This is problem. This is about the political will. Second, when we are talking about agriculture, my experience is teaching me that agriculture is a not that difficult issue if we are talking about seeds, a planting of seeds, organizing production, implementing new knowledge, but logistic is even more difficult. Logistic in agriculture is one of the crucial things. Many times we are wasting money, resources because of very bad logistics. If we are focused on logistics, we are going to be much more efficient. And this is what I wanted also to mention. And the third thing is our experience from Serbia. We've been facing with the problem how to reform agriculture. And we understood that the position of farmers is crucially important and very vulnerable because they are, the farmers are very traditional people. They would like to continue production on the way how their grandfathers have been doing it, because they feel that this is part of their identity, something like that. And what we did, we employed all unemployed agricultural engineers in my country, 3,000 of them, and focusing them to work with 100 farmers. This is how we covered 300,000 farmers in Serbia. They had to work individually, in person with them, to visit them every few weeks and to talk with them and to make kind of suggestions how to plant seed, how to do this, and how to make corrections every day. And we achieved a tremendous success, really tremendous success. And I'm thinking about Azerbaijan right now. That can be very, very interesting. Also other countries. We have people with a significant knowledge, but we are not using that knowledge in a proper way. And I think that kind of brainstorming how to use our experiences in a proper way can help very much in terms of agriculture. But of course, we have to invest in startups, in new companies, and to make more attractive that field and to promote agriculture as extremely important for the future of the mankind and young people to involve in that activities. This is what I wanted to share with you.
Thank you very much, Boris, and I'm sure the colleague will pick on it, and thank you for sharing the example of Serbia on extensions. So, Kilau, and maybe tell me your name, I can't see it very well from here.
Of course. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Klau Chmielowska, and I'm also one of the young NGIC leaders from Poland. I lead a reproductive health nonprofit that works with women in extreme poverty in Nigeria, which is the exact same group I think we'll be kind of discussing about the effects of climate change, who it touches the most. The one that I work with are rural, are working in hard-to-reach communities. And one discussion I usually have with them is that a lot of them want to move to cities. There is not a lot of future in agriculture, especially for smallholder farmers. And in Africa, almost like 1/3 of youth is unemployed. In countries like Nigeria, it's over half. There's no really a reason for a lot of young people to decide to stay in the spaces that they were before and to invest more time, more of the future, more of the jobs and career opportunities into going to agriculture. And without people working on this, we are not able to have the agricultural future that we've all been discussing. So I think we touched very briefly on the youth inclusion in agriculture, but I would like to ask all the panelists about what are the actionable steps that we actually can provide and can offer something for those young people to be worth their while. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Klaus. So, panelists, I'm going to give you now the floor to maybe speak and reply to the 6 interventions, and maybe to give us your last word. Maybe I will start by the end and go around. So maybe, Abdulaziz, if we're going to start with you and leave Ismail for the last talk. Abdulaziz, would you want to start and we do it the other way around?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
I will be very brief. During the COP28, there was an agreement on supporting the affected countries by the climate change, by the catastrophes that they have suffered. And the United States donated $17.5 million. And those countries need at least $450 billion per year. And when I look at the huge donations from America to finance the wars in Ukraine and Gaza, I said, those need to be kept living and in a good condition. Why you support killing people? So there's something wrong with the mentality of certain people in the world. This is number one. Number two, when we call for collaboration at the global level to make our planet safe, livable, sustainable, we are calling for the future for the generations who will come later on. When I heard Meera talking about Africa, and I live in Africa, I am in Morocco now for more than 36 years, and I visited many countries in Africa, and I saw how the farmers in Africa suffer because they don't have the means and the funds to utilize the modern technology. They use their hands only, or their cows and their camels, or donkeys, and any animal that is available to them. And they don't have fertilizers, they don't have any sorts of modern support that can make the job successful. When it is drought, they suffer. When it is floods, they suffer. When they don't have solar energy, they don't have wind energy, they don't have even electric energy. So the world is really not doing its job to help the needy people to come up to the task and make themselves sufficient in living and in producing. Professor Ismail Serageldin said at the beginning of this set that the industrialized world and the producing world throw 30% of their food production away. And I know that they throw it in the oceans and in the seas because they want the price to rise up. While there are many mouths, hungry mouths in the world who need that food to make them live decently. So it is a moral issue, and we have to tackle this issue in this particular sense. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Abdulaziz, and thank you for bringing really the right to food, the right to everybody to eat, and the need for a more just world at large. So with that, I'll go to you, Filip.
I share opinion of my friend Abdulaziz. It is necessary on the global level to provide a necessary amount of food and water. And all states, regional, sub-regional initiatives and organizations and United Nations should be obliged to do everything in their capacity and responsibilities to realize it. To have enough need and amount of food and water, it is a great task, maybe the greatest task concerning quality of citizens. That depends of agricultural sector. It's very visible. It is my message.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Filip. And another call really for, again, considering food as a human right and really providing for all. So now we're going to go to Meera, Ilhama, and then Ismail to close us. Yeah.
Thank you. I mean, I could try and respond to all, but I think in that case we will be here a long time and actually miss the food that we're supposed to eat. So I think the one thing that I will respond to is the question around logistics that the former president brought up. Logistics also very much connects to the point of urban areas. Food our food demand, or the farmers, what they produce, is largely actually for urban areas. Urban areas really, really drive what we eat, when we eat it, how we eat it, etc. And if we improve the connections, logistics, between urban areas and our rural areas, actually there is a lot of potential in transforming entire food systems. So I think that is the one piece that I would respond to. Noel, very quickly. It's funny that you say India is struggling to produce. Actually, India is one of the best producers of small-scale machinery. Genuinely, it is in fact supplying a lot of African countries with small-scale machinery. So a lot of innovations happening there. Ismahane already mentioned that they are investing a lot of money into the agriculture sector and research. It's all coming from there. It's very good. China is doing similar things as well. So just then very quickly, because I have to bring the Ban Ki-moon messages to this conversation, I really emphasize that African farmers need support for adaptation. We really genuinely need to scale up what is available to them. And I think really with that, I'm going to stop. I think together, and I'm speaking again to a room full of dignitaries with some seriously powerful mobile phones in your hands. Please call the people to tell them to show the money. That's all I say today.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Meera. A call for adaptation, focus, and finance. So, Ilhama, over to you.
Dear guests, sometimes I am getting unhappy that I am a government person here. I need to stay inside the formal patterns, but I would like to say something. Unfortunately, world is changing, even we want or not. World is changing day by day, and population is growing, and unfortunately, pollution is growing too. This is not optimistic side of this, our world, where we live. But there is optimistic sides too. This is communication, I think. Communication on the modern world. Right now, we are here from the old world. This is really nice. This is great that we can share all our practices, all our knowledges. We can negotiate and we can find the best. We will try every day by day, to find the new tools, new solutions, and good things. But to be on together, it's important. My message is coming from this side. And the last, but not least, as a famous proverb says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Let's go far together, ensuring a sustainable and prosperous future for all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Ilhama, for bringing the African proverb. And really, if we want to go far, we have to go together. Ismail, you have the last word.
Well, I think we need to be reminded of two additional things. One is that because we do have population growth, with the forecast that we have is that we need between 60 and 70% more food production between now and 2050. And, but that will have to be offset in so many ways, because there's population movement towards urbanization. There's possibilities of urban agriculture being done differently. There's a transformation that is taking place right now. So we must be able to go beyond simply saying we are going to increase efficiency and increase production as if it was still static in the past. Yes, we had already a deficit, as we said, about 10% of the population is still going hungry, so we need to do that. But we're going to need 60 to 70% more food than what we are producing now. We will save something on the efficiency side, but we will have to transform it. I think one of the great advantages that we have in dealing with this is that from the beginning, there is no single solution. I mean, we talk about renewable energy, photovoltaics, wind, etc., and they can be found pretty much almost anywhere. But agroecological zones are such that we have to use and deploy different solutions in different locations. And more importantly, the rich will have to help the poor through the kind of agricultural research that is required. If they don't, they will have to face up to a huge migration. And that is going to pose serious problems. In practically every country that is now a target of migration, it has become a severe political problem. So actually, to avoid dealing with the problems of hundreds of millions of people being forced to move out from the dry areas, where would they go? They will go towards the rich north and all the problems that are there. And therefore, it's in the interest of the rich north to work together. Work together, but no one size fits all. Everything has to be deployed according to the realities that are there. Final word, we did not speak enough about the gender dimension. In this discussion, women play a very central role in everything, especially in the dry areas where the issues of water are very absent. Little girls are pressed into service to go spend hours carrying water back and forth, and from the very beginning. So they carry the biggest burden, and in parts of Africa, 80% of the food is produced by women farmers, not by men farmers. The men usually like to work on cash crops, but the food is usually a responsibility of women. So the gender dimension has to be brought in, and that is my fundamental message.
Thank you very much, Ismail. So maybe I see really the evolution of this session. We start talking about agriculture and climate change, and we ended up talking about youth engagement, women and gender, people-centric, smallhold farmers. We got the drugs area that was brought up by Boris. We talked about defense and how much money we are pouring in defense. We talked about migration. And by the end, really what I'm taking, it needs to be transformed, but it has to be a just transformation, a just transition, and we need to focus on context specific. So it's not one solution for all, and it is all about financing new ideas. So financing startup, financing, scaling up through local SMEs and local people in those contexts. Thank you so much. It was a privilege to moderate this session. Thank you. And now you are free to go for lunch. Thank you.